Hello, friends. Echocardiography is a bedside investigation to know about the anatomy and function of heart using ultrasound. Every ICU physician and doctors working in emergency department must know the basics of echocardiography. Today, we will discuss only the transthoracic echocardiography in ICU. The competency in basic critical care echocardiography is now regarded as a mandatory part of critical care training. So let's begin with the case presentation. 65-year-old male presents to the emergency department with 5-day history of cough and fever. On arrival to emergency, his blood pressure was 80/60 and heart rate was 120. ECG showed T-wave inversions in all chest leads. Lactate in ABG was 4.5 millimole per liter. Chest X-ray showed haziness on the left hemithorax. Diagnosis made was community-acquired pneumonia with septic shock, and then we started the fluid resuscitation with 2 liters of fluid crystalloid given over 2 hours. After the fluid resuscitation, in the line of septic shock guideline, he developed rapid desaturation and signs of pulmonary edema on auscultation. Now, question we should be asked in this case that what intervention led to deterioration of the respiratory status and desaturation in this case? Probably in this case, fluid resuscitation might have led to pulmonary edema, and heart of this patient could have not tolerated the amount of fluid which we normally administer in any typical case of septic shock. Therefore, before fluid administration, in this case, we should have performed a screening echo. So in basic critical care echocardiography, one should know the indications, how to obtain the basic views, and then how to use the simple approach in echo in emergency settings. In this video presentation, I'm going to cover the main indications and basic views only. The simple approach will be covered in the next video of the basic echo series. Why do we need to perform it and when to perform echo in ICU? These are the questions they should normally ask. Basically, we perform the echo in ICU to know the certain informations which are vital to the time-sensitive, goal-directed case management. Echocardiography is pivotal in the diagnosis and management of a shock patient. Rapid diagnosis and time simultaneous management is what saves the life of a patient. All of us want our critical patient to become better in vitals. And when patient comes in shock or develop shock in course of ICU stay, we would certainly like to know why and what went wrong so that we can correct the abnormality quickly. So basically, echo is good hemodynamic assessment tool by which we can know the cardiac, obstructive, and hypovolemic causes of shock. Apart from it, we can also determine the volume status and then the fluid responsiveness. The fluid responsiveness means whether the stroke volume or cardiac output increases with the fluid bolus administered in a shock patient. IVC diameter, LVOT, volume time integral, and the Vmax can be easily measured using the bedside echocardiography. Many a times, a patient is difficult to wean from ventilator, and hence echo is done to find out whether the cardiac component is responsible for weaning failure. In 2002, the term weaning-induced cardiac failure was introduced. Among the multiple causes of weaning failure from mechanical ventilation, the cardiovascular dysfunction is increasingly recognized as a frequent cause that can be treated successfully if detected early. Isolated diastolic dysfunction was associated with a prolongation of weaning. Increased filling pressure with the left ventricle relaxation impairment may be the key mechanism of weaning-induced cardiac failure, and that has to be detected using the transthoracic echocardiography. IVC diameter has been correlated with the atrial and left ventricular filling pressures and anti-proBNP values. Echocardiography predicts the diuretic response in patients admitted with acute decompensated heart failure in ICU. A study in 47 critically ill patients observed that a negative change in the IVC diameter at 48 hours is predictive of diuretic response. Echo has been used to guide resuscitation during the course of CPCR. An appropriate LV compression would be helpful to improve the quality of CPCR. And in this regard, transthoracic bedside echocardiography may be very useful to identify the optimal location for chest compression, and also to confirm the return of spontaneous circulation, and also to find out the cause of cardiac arrest such as tension pneumothorax, pulmonary embolism, or cardiac tamponade. So basically, echo can guide your cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and hence more and more research is required in this area also. Now we will move on to the next part, the basic echocardiographic views and how to obtain those views. There are basically 3 windows through which one has to place echo probe and obtain various views. These windows are apical, parasternal, and subxiphoid or subcostal windows. Through apical window, three most commonly obtained echo views are four-chamber view, five-chamber view, and two-chamber views. Through parasternal window, two most commonly obtained echo views are long axis and short axis views. Through subcostal or subxiphoid window, three most commonly obtained echo views are long axis view, short axis view, and great vessel view. All these windows and views should be always born in your minds so that you can go systematically to obtain these views. Now we will discuss each view one by one. Apical window is the window at the apex of the heart. The probe is kept at the point of maximal impulse, which is usually palpated lateral to the left midclavicular line. The marker of the probe should be just pointing towards the left shoulder. The view which is obtained is apical four-chamber view when you do like this. And this is the first view which should be obtained in the focused cardiac ultrasound. It gives you a lot of information such as the chamber size, contractility, and the mitral wall movements and flows. So here is the view. To obtain a good five-chamber view, you should tilt the tip of the transducer cephalad to scan superiorly from apical four-chamber view. This is the excellent view to the left ventricular outflow tract and aortic wall. So this is the fifth chamber, the left ventricular outflow tract and aortic wall, allowing the spectral Doppler assessment through each to determine the left ventricular cardiac output and gradients across the aortic valve respectively. So this is the fifth five-chamber view, and the fifth chamber over here is the left ventricular outflow tract, which is continuing through the aortic valve to the aorta. If you just rotate the probe approximately 90-degree counterclockwise from apical four-chamber view, you would get apical two-chamber view. And this view is excellent for assessing wall motion of the inferior wall, anterior wall, and apex. So any abnormality in the inferior wall or anterior wall or apex can be diagnosed here. So this is a very important view in MI. Always remember that from apical window, all chambers can be scanned tangentially by just tilting and rotating the probe, and this requires expertise. Apical four-chamber is the easiest and the most accessible view in apical region. After scanning through apical window, we move to parasternal window, for which the probe needs to be placed 2 to 3 inches away from the sternum in the fourth or fifth intercostal space. For long axis view, the probe marker should be facing towards the right shoulder. Parasternal long axis view is the best view to see the left atrium, mitral valve, RVOT, that is right ventricular outflow tract, and LVOT, as well as the aortic valve. We can calculate the left ventricular ejection fraction using M-mode T-Codes method. So this is a very peculiar pathological parasternal long axis view showing the large left atrial thrombus. After parasternal long axis view, turn the probe clockwise till you get the left ventricle in circular shape on ultrasound screen. And this is the parasternal short axis view. There are 4 levels of parasternal short axis views, namely ATPV level, mitral valve level, mid-ventricular level, and apical level. To achieve the ATPV level, that is aortic, tricuspid, and pulmonic valve level, also known as the basal level, the probe is moved towards the base of the heart in short axis view to see 3 aortic valve leaflets in the circle. When leaflets approximate at the end of systole, gives the impression of Mercedes-Benz sign. You can see all the cusp of the aortic valve in this view. Therefore, it is ideal to observe the opening and closing motion of the valve. This view also enables you to estimate the size of left atrium and detect the atrial septal defect. Parasternal short axis basal view should also be used to study the tricuspid valve and to identify any membranous ventricular septal defect, and also the pathologies of the right ventricular outflow tract and pulmonary valve. So a lot of abnormalities can be seen in this view, and also sometimes you can see the large RV and also the thrombus in the pulmonary artery beyond the pulmonic valve. By tilting the transducer towards the apex of the left ventricle slightly, but staying perpendicular to the long axis of the heart, you will arrive at the plane of the mitral valve. So this is the mitral valve level of the parasternal short axis. Here the mitral valve is seen orthogonally with its anterior and posterior leaflets. This view is ideal to observe the opening and closing motion of the mitral valve, which has been compared to moving fish mouth. By tilting the transducer even further towards the apex, you will gradually see the papillary muscles appearing. Now you are transecting the left ventricle almost through the middle, the papillary muscle level. The parasternal short axis left ventricle mid-view is ideal to inspect features such as the left ventricular function, regional and global, and the size of ventricles and the characteristics of the left ventricle hypertrophy. You can see the LV wall hypertrophy very well in the mid-ventricular level. And in this level, you can actually comment upon the size of the RV, and also sometimes you can see the McConnell sign here, and also the D-shaped left ventricle when there is a pulmonary embolism suspected. To view the apical segments of the left ventricle from the parasternal window, you need to move the transducer down by 1 or 2 intercostal spaces and tilt it towards the apex. The left ventricle appears much smaller in this view because we cut the left ventricle close to the apex, where its diameter is actually small. This view is not really a standard view, but is very helpful in many situations, such as when assessing the apical left ventricular function or identifying an apical thrombus. Now we will discuss about the subxiphoid or subcostal window, which has many advantages. There is no bone or lung tissue to obstruct our view in the heart. The subcostal window permits us to image patient in supine position. Once you are familiar with the subcostal window, you will see that it is not only a substitute for the parasternal and the apical window, but that is very, very superior to these windows. In addition, some pathologies can only be investigated from the subcostal approach. So here we have 3 views. So how to place the transducer? You have to place the transducer under the xiphoid bone, slightly to the right of the sternum. The transducer marker should be to the left, and imaging plane should be directed upward and to the left shoulder in slightly clockwise rotation. Start with the subcostal 4-chamber view. This is the view you will obtain when the marker is to the left side. It looks very similar to the 4-chamber view of apical, with the difference that apex is more to the left and the septum is oblique, and the right heart chambers are near field right below the liver. So you would see the liver in this window. Besides, this view is ideal to visualize the pericardial effusion, which is often found adjacent to the right heart. You are imaging the interatrial septum in perpendicular fashion. You can also identify the atrial septal defect on this view. You can see the right-sided pleural effusion on the subcostal 4-chamber view here in this image. Okay, and also you can see the ascites, which is seen near the liver. So this view is very good view to see the 3 kinds of fluid: ascitic fluid, pericardial fluid, and right pleural effusion. By rotating the transducer counterclockwise, you can create the short axis views. These views are very similar to the short axis view you obtain from the parasternal approach. From the subcostal 4-chamber view, the subcostal view of great vessel is obtained by rotating the transducer marker towards the patient's head until the IVC is elongated. Slight adjustments in the angle and rotation may be necessary to demonstrate the elongated IVC as it enters the right atrium and hepatic vein optimally. From the subcostal view of the IVC, the subcostal view of abdominal aorta is also obtained by angling the sound beam to the patient's left side. Slight adjustment in the angle and rotation may be necessary to demonstrate an elongated abdominal aorta. And in this picture, you can see the IVC, aorta, and hepatic vein all together below the liver. How will you differentiate IVC from aorta? By its pulsation, and also by putting a pulse wave spectral Doppler. While measuring IVC, M mode is kept approximately 2 cm from the junction with the right atrium and usually upstream to the superior hepatic vein inlet. That is the optimal position to measure the IVC and keep the M mode cursor. Then you can basically measure the IVC distensibility index, which is very, very important to find out the fluid responsiveness. So here I complete the video here. For the simple approach, see the next video. Thank you so much. Please subscribe to my channel, and I hope that you found this video very, very informative. Thanks a lot.